In today's episode, we're speaking to Kristina Snyder. She is a creative force in the business world as a founder and the CEO of Snyder. She uses her creativity to represent artists, illustrators, and animators and visual artists from around the world. Prior to founding Snyder, Kristina started two successful companies, both in the field of creativity. Her belief is that creativity is at the core of everything we do, and it connects us to something higher that we can be accessed and used for personal growth. Let's find out how she changed her life by changing her mindset. Let's find out. Welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And today I'm so excited. We have Kristina Snyder with us. Welcome, Kristina.
Thank you so much, Gull. What a pleasure to be talking to you today. I really look forward to it.
The pleasure's all mine. I'm super excited for our conversation. Everyone's heard your intro and they know how fabulous you are. But Kristina, in your own words, please do share what it is that you do.
Well, I call myself an entrepreneur with creative tendencies, which means that I have a clear point of view on creative growth. I have started several successful companies, and the latest of which I'm now the founder and CEO of. So I'm the CEO and founder of Snyder, which is an artist representation agency, and we also do creative production, which means that we get artist jobs in the commercial industry.
Oh, fabulous. And I think that's a worthy cause, because there's plenty of artists out there who are struggling financially, even though they are brilliant. And I think that's a great bridging thing that you're doing. Right, so it's great that you do that. But today we want to learn about you, Kristina. How did you get started? And I know you have a story to tell. So please walk us through. Tell us, how did you start and how did you end up here doing this? And I know you've got a few successful companies you've had, but I want to talk about not the success, but the struggles, the obstacles that you overcame, and the self-belief that you had to instill in yourself or learn from a mentor that allowed you to be where you are, highly successful where you are right now. So talk us through your journey. How did it start for you and how did you end up here?
Well, I grew up in Sweden, and after high school, I moved to Stockholm, and that's where I really started my creative journey. I did have a childhood that incorporated a lot of art and music and reading books. I was obsessed with reading as a child. But when I moved to Stockholm, after my studies of literature, I was very much into photography at that time. So I went to photo school. I did photography for many, many years. And I also dabbled in editorial a bit, because I managed to wrangle a job at the biggest morning paper at the time and the photo department, researching photography for articles. And while I was at that job, I met a friend of mine. He's still a friend. His name is Anders. And he had a job, a sort of a commission to go to India to document in words. He's a writer, a women's cooperative that did creative handicrafts, supported by a Swedish organization. So he convinced me to go to India. And we went to India to do this documentation, partly because there was a festival called the Festival of India in Stockholm a little bit later that year. So long story short, we did the project, but in pretty early on, I met somebody there who became a very big friend of mine. Her name is Christy, and we became friends like you do in your 20s. It was like we wanted to do everything together. So that resulted in a road trip in America. She lived in New York State, and we did this road trip. We bought a car, we outfitted it, we had big plans. And so we did do the road trip from, I think, Connecticut to Key West. But what I want to tell you is I had met somebody on my third night in New York City. So I met my future husband. So the whole road trip, we had to stop and look for pay phones. And I spent hours and hours on the phone with this man that I met in New York in a bar in Manhattan. I didn't plan on it, but eventually, after 3 or 4 weeks, I had to say to myself, you have to go check this out. So I went back to New York, and that just resulted in me a few months later getting married to a musician with deep roots in the music field in New York. So there I was. I found myself in this creative place in the East Village in New York. And I started to look for a job and thinking about what could I do with my experience, still very into photography. And that resulted in me landing a couple of like low-end jobs before I started freelancing as a photo researcher and photo editor. So my first couple of jobs in that industry was for Time and Newsweek and Life at the time, People Magazine, InStyle. So I bounced around during the day, my daytime hours. I bounced around as a photo editor and researcher. And at night, I was part of my husband's music scene ventures. So I say in my bio, I was the girl who schlepped equipment at 3 a.m. in the morning from CBGB's. And at night and during the daytime, I was part of this amazing photo industry that was at the time in the 90s was very, very different from what it is now. So that's how I ended up here. And then the story continues.
Okay, so that's an interesting journey. Now, I think you've skipped over quite a few of those life decisions. First of all, that taking the decision to go across country in your early 20s from New York to the other side, that takes courage, and I suppose it took more courage then. I think nowadays, because with the rise of social media, I think we're more familiar with what to expect, because everything's on social media. Any part of the world, what to expect or whatever. It's not as hidden, as unknown as it was back in the 90s. Nowadays, everything, we can even pick up a TikTok video on remote Amazon, forest tribe somewhere. We can even figure that out because somebody must have taken a picture or video and posted it somewhere. So how did you, in your early 20s, make that decision that you're going to go, and then by yourself with a friend in this unknown, area, and then also give that up and move, and make that decision of going back to this individual. Now that's love, and that's understandable. But each of those paths took a really difficult decision, and then you took that. And being so young, how did you come to those decisions?
Well, that's a really interesting question that I ask myself at times, because when I think about my life and everything that I did, I was a young woman in New York, not my language, not my city, had no friends. I had a boyfriend, that was it. But I think when I look back at my decisions, number one, to do what I did in Stockholm and never giving up. I mean, there's one thing that stands out to me, and that is like taking a risk.
Yeah.
So I have a love for this word parlay, which is spelled P-A-R-L-A-Y.
Mm-hmm.
And it really means like to risk, to bet. It's a betting term. And to me, it always represented this sort of, you take what you have and then you take a risk. And my best way to describe it is, what I did at that time is, if you take a risk, but you involve creativity, and if you have a strategic thinking about the next step after that step, then it becomes less scary, at least for me. Another thing that I always thought about, I don't know where I got this, but I always thought about like, jump in the cold water. That was like in my mind, jump in the cold water and see what happens. Because really, there was nothing that I did that couldn't be reversed. I mean, I could have gone to India and then nothing worked out and I came back and nothing else happened. But I had a hunger for exploring the world. And I also was not really intimidated by much. I have an innate hunger for seeing what happens. And I think that just doing it was the method. When it comes to New York, I still don't really understand that, but it had to do with love. And I thought to myself, if you do not explore this relationship, I think you will be sorry for the rest of your life. And sure enough, I'm still married to the same man, and we have an amazing relationship. And that it has really, that was the foundation of so many things, not just emotionally and love wise, but also for the creative space that I found myself in all of a sudden in New York. From Stockholm to New York is a big journey. And especially then, the 90s was just at the tail end of the wild 80s, you know, where things were starting to recover in New York City from the 70s, when it was like bankrupt and a pretty bad place to be. So it was, yeah, it was, I can only say that I chalk it up to parlaying and thinking about, why not? I'll take this risk and I'll see what happens.
I think that sums up the life for most successful people, because you have to take the leap of faith and then see, okay, well, I'll figure out what I need to do on the way down if I do fall down.
Yes, exactly.
Which is amazing. So take us from there. So now that you're in New York and you're doing this amazing day job, which is you love, you know, and then you're kind of being part of your husband's legacy with his music. How did you transition from there into having your own companies? And, you know, so talk us through that.
Yes. So I was a freelancer in New York City in the freelance photo editing world for about 10, 12 years. And that eventually a person at CBS TV called me to be part of to do a freelance gig at the photo department there. So that taught me a whole new set of skills, which is set photography, the pictures that you see when you announce a show, posters, and sort of, here's a picture from Mad Men, let's say. That's not a CBS show, but anyway. So that in turn led to a position as a freelancer at HBO. Okay. And HBO, I did the same thing. I worked on the first season of The Sopranos and many, many TV movies, editing the film that the photographers did on set. I met somebody there, her name is Victoria, who had been an agent for photographers and then segued into working at HBO. She said, in the conversation, just kind of a thread that I picked up, she said, why don't you should really try being an agent for photographers. It's a really great job. You make a million phone calls and you can make good business. This is something that I think you should think about. She probably never realized that I took that as I wonder what that would be like. And so I started just from a photographer that I had met in my freelance photo editing days, Håkan Ludvigsson, who was a very big location and car photographer in Sweden. He had faith in me and we really got along. We were very good friends and are to this day. And I started shopping him around to advertising agencies. And it was pretty much like immediately that we got a very big job, a 2-week shoot for a Jaguar. And that kind of made me think also, I wonder if this can be expanded. So all of a sudden, I put out my shingle as a photo agent, a photography agent, and shopping photographers around the commercial industry in New York, which is really like Madison Avenue was very strong. It was centralized. That's where all the advertising really happened. And that from that job, it was again parlaying and taking a bet on opening an agency. So I opened Snyder and Company in I think 2001. Had a very bad setback after 9/11, and it was 6 months. Like I was open for 6 months, and then that happened. So I get back to that story because that's actually where my financial story emanates from. And so that was successful up until I would say 2009, where photography started to lose a little bit. What happened was Instagram became a force in the industry, and all of a sudden everybody was a photographer.
Yeah.
So that sort of like photography went down and content went up like this. That's about when I realized that, working with illustrators, because I added a few illustrators also, and I made a division called Snyder and the Swedes for mostly Scandinavian illustrators. And I said to myself, working with an illustrator with a commercial entity like a advertising company, so much easier because there's no line items for car trucks, location scouts, hair and makeup, that kind of thing. Everything comes from imagination. So illustration is pure imagination. And if it doesn't go the way the client wants it to go, or we need to change, then the illustrator just changes it. So that kind of put a bug in my head again, saying, I wonder what I can do with this. And I decided, after not a very successful partnership with a photography agency, that photography was not my path, but illustration and later animation was the way I was going to focus my efforts on. And so this happened very organically. It was like, there was a why not spirit into it, but it was also backed up by real things, like real feelings and real events, like such as, it's so much harder to negotiate a photography job. It's worth much more money, but the stress and the fight to get that job is greater than an illustration job. So I figured that was a worthy effort. And in 2013, I parlayed Snyder and Company and Snyder and the Sweets into one company, named it Snyder New York. I mean, that made sense at the time. And then I focused on illustration only. And I built that company later with my now co-founder, Kat Iranajad, who came on in the fall of 2013 as a freelancer. And we built this together. She is an expert in building client relationships and artist relationships. And I was an agent as well. But later on, I would say about a year ago, I started to feel like I'm better at running the company and being the CEO for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is quite interesting, because a lot of the times now, the reason why I love this story is you've pivoted your focus throughout your journey. You haven't just sat back and thought, oh no, all hell's broken loose, Instagram's come along and I no longer have the kind of the clients that needed and the kind of the way I focus on my business. You took that as an opportunity and pivoted. And you've been doing that throughout. And that seems to be the theme throughout your life's journey. You pivot, you try, you work at it, you do well. And then as things progress, I mean, as things do change, you pivot and you change. And you, as you say, you parlay, you take risks in other areas. Walk me through the thinking that goes behind it. How do you have the courage to, I mean, it's worked out for you. What if it didn't work out? How do you talk to yourself about it? How do you deal with it? Because of course, if you have a company, you have outgoings, you have staff members and so forth. This is a very big question for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in today's day and age with so much uncertainty. How do you deal with that?
I believe personally, it has to do with intuition, a lot of intuition. And I've trained my intuition to work really well for me. I have this feeling that happens when I know something is right. I want to stand up and go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like that. I'm nervous, I'm scared, but I'm also excited. That feeling is, to me, what I go towards now. I didn't always. It was my business story is sort of, it has various periods where I did not feel that at all. There was nothing. I did it purely for other reasons. But that feeling, my intuition, and my desire to really expose myself to new things and learn. I think it's a mixture of intuition and curiosity, but also knowing myself really well. As we get older, I think we sort of know what works for us. This works for me. I think it's not a knowing, it's more a feeling for me. And also strategic thinking. So I shouldn't say just intuition, but it's also strategic thinking and picking up what's happening in the world. And sure enough, illustration became a major player in Instagram. It became really popular. And so maybe there was something about cues that I was picking up, but this is also important. I also wanted to create a company that would work for me and my needs. So I had an apartment, or my husband and I had an apartment in New York for a long time, but we always had a house in the country. very cheap, very modest, even in the very lean years of the early 90s. So my desire when I finally got into, behind the steering wheel and could do whatever I wanted, it was to create a company that worked for me. And what did that mean? It meant not being in New York City every single day and going to an office. I wanted to work remotely. And that is what happened at Snyder, New York, that I designed it so that I am the owner. I can do it however I want that works for me. And that also, it's interesting because it coincided also with email, the birth of the email contact. Nobody called on my office phone where I sat. I had an office on Broadway and I had a landline and a computer. I was there every day and nothing happened. And I said to myself, why couldn't I sit at home and do this? So it's also that, like taking charge and being, realizing that your ideas can really be the basis of a really fruitful company. And I'm sorry that I'm going on so long, but I also wanted to say that through COVID, this is what really worked for my company. It's all of a sudden people were freaked out about going to an office. We have an office in New York City on Fifth Avenue, but it's very small. It's mostly for meetings and we didn't have a big overhead. So here we were in COVID and we were all over New York, Chicago, Rhode Island at the time. And as such, we were kind of COVID proof. You see what I mean?
Yeah, yep. So what seems to be coming through is you've been very intentional in the way you've designed your companies. And as you've sort of moved forward, of course, you use intuition, but intuition isn't blind intuition. You take calculated risks based on your intuition, and that's what you've been doing. And that's what I sort of push towards my clients, not to hustle, but to take inspired actions. But you have to calculate them as well. You have to, be strategic with them as well. And that's what you've been doing. And that's probably the secret to your success. You haven't just relied on logic. There's been intuition involved, but intuition combined with strategy, the right strategy, which felt right for you, and then being intentional about how you want to form your companies. That seems to be the running theme of your success. Would you agree?
I do agree. Yes. I also thought of something else while you were saying that. And that is, my ambition level is high. In fact, even as a young student, I had this quote by some famous author, like, work is better than, something about working hard. And I always wanted to work really hard. And I have, like, I had my first job when I was 12, I think. And I always worked. That inspired me. But it's also something about not expecting like a spectacular result. And with that, like my philosophy is also, it's about the quality of life that you have at the time. And so if it's like, I'm going to build it and make $1 billion, that's never my motivation. So motivation, I learned about that when I met my husband, who is a Buddhist practicing. And he told me, you do one thing with the motivation, where the motivation is clear and clean and, for all sentient beings, then it's very powerful. So I have never really strived for being, a huge business influence, or I've just done my thing. And I think that has worked. I think growing slow and just listening to yourself and doing it your way is a very powerful recipe for success.
And I love that because I think too much in today's age is hustle. You have to get this and you have to do that. And I remember a few years ago, the golden number was 10K a month for coaches and consultants in the online space. Now the golden number is 100K. And if you're not making 100K, then somehow you're a failure. You're not doing well. And I'm sure in a couple of years, that would be moved to $1 million a month. Why are you not making $1 million a month and so forth?
Right.
And the goalposts will always move. You need to know what's right for you. And, I'm being a money person, I'm always encouraging you to make as much money as you desire and make it so that you're comfortable. But what makes me comfortable is not the same. It's not going to be the same amount of money. It's going to make you comfortable. Yeah. It's a very subjective number. It's wealth is a very subjective element. It's, you know, what makes me feel wealthy would not make you feel wealthy, and vice versa. We have different numbers attached to it, different reasons behind it, different needs and desires. But as long as you're truly faithful to yourself, then what I see is that you're very wealthy. You are very wealthy. As long as you are comfortable, you're happy. Billions is not right for everybody. But for some people, billions, even billions is not enough. You know, there are people like Elon Musk, they're probably working for trillions or beyond or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to compete with anyone. You just have to go within and create a life that makes you happy. And I think what you hit on the nail was creating a life where you are living. You know, you don't want to be existing and running after things and not be happy. You need to live your life and look back at your life and say, yeah, I've lived a good life.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. And I also, this sounds strange, but I'm kind of anti-wealth. To have a huge mansion on the hill with millions and millions, and it's not my goal. I want to be creative. That's really my wealth. And so being in charge after years and years of being dictated to in the creative industry in New York, I mean, that was at the time largely run by men. All of the important people were male, except the photo department, the sort of lower, were almost always women. To me, the wealth in that was to run my own show, to put my own flag down, whatever it meant. And it sounds, in hindsight, of course, that sounds like super easy, but it has never been easy, really. And remember my background, living in the East Village in a 200 square foot apartment, basement apartment with my husband, and just like trying to figure it out. Like it was paycheck to paycheck in the beginning, definitely. Then by the time 10 years rolled around, it was like a little bit better, and then a little bit better, and then worse, and then a little bit better. So I am not somebody who comes from money. My family were academics, both of them, and money was never really a priority for me, or for my family even. So I have never really been prioritizing, I'm going to make $1 million. That was never in my head. I never even believed that I could do that.
Well, I think the reason why you didn't make it is because you didn't believe you could. So that's the thing. I'm not. I do believe everyone should make as much money as they need to.
I agree. Yes.
But you need to be mindful of what your needs are. I think a lot of people are mistaken. When I see wealth, I don't see big mansion and yacht. That's not my thing. But I do want to make a lot of money, but I have a reason to do other things, because I think money gives you the freedom and to make the choices you want, to have live the life you want, to live the legacy you want. And I have some aspirations that I want to create. But living in a 20-house mansion is not my goal. To have a $1 million or $2 billion yacht is not my goal. That just that kind of thing just doesn't appeal to me. And I'm considering I'm seasick anyway, so those things are not that appealing to me. But when it comes to money and wealth, you have to pick what's right for you and what amount makes it wealthy. I mean, by many people's standards, I know in my family, and especially people back home in Pakistan, where my family is originally from, they would think I'm a bloody millionaire. Well, I am, but they think I'm extremely wealthy and blah, blah, blah. I am not where I want to be, so I don't classify myself as wealthy. There's a definition, there's a mismatch between our definitions, but that's because everything I need I have. So, but it's not where I want to be because of what other aspirations I have. But then that's my choice.
Yeah.
And everybody gets to make their own choice, and this is why it's important. So we should never compare ourselves and our goals and ambitions to other people. You need to go in and think what's right for you. So I love the fact that you've lived a life of purpose. And you've lived a life that you can look back and be proud of, and you've got more than enough money to take care of your needs. You're not destitute. Yet, why would you want to focus on making billions when you're comfortable in your lifestyle that you are in? And that's the most important thing. Yeah,
and I think it can also be a distraction. It can be when I'm on a big cleanse, and I'm cleaning out a lot of my possessions, and I feel so much better when I have less. Not, you know, in the 90s we used to have much less than we do now in terms of clothing and possessions. Living in a 200 square foot apartment, like nothing. When I met my husband, we jokingly said that he came to our household with a salad bowl and a mattress. That was it. And so I just think less material wealth and focus on also good deeds that you could do. Like, and that's why I'm saying I'm anti-wealth. Like, when I see how people spend their money, it's kind of frightening to me, because I think if I had $1 billion, I would try to put it to work somehow for the good of the planet.
I think that the problem you have, and the problem a lot of people have, is they see the wealthy spending in the way that media portrays it. Yeah, there are so many people I know who are the secret millionaires and billionaires now. They don't go show off the kind of money they have or what they do with it. And but I also do believe that, for example, buying your own private jet. Some say, well, that's just a waste of money. Now, I remember, because I didn't want to get my own. I actually want to get my own airline. And I remember reading this and I can't remember which entrepreneur it was. He said, look, I don't, and because somebody said to him, "What? That's really extravagant. I wonder how many people that could have fed, that jet of yours." And he turned around and said, "Well, I don't know how many people could have been fed with the amount of money I paid for the jet, but I know that a lot of families are living off from, the production of the jet, from the designing of it, from the maintenance of it, the pilots that fly it, the air crew that maintain it. So there are a number of families who are benefiting from that commercial side of it, and that's ongoing and continuous compared to the number of families that could be fed from the one-time payment of that, the amount I paid for the jet." And I love that kind of thinking, that you bring e-commerce into the world, allow people to make their money, and rather than just giving them money. So I'm creating opportunities for you. I think this is what a lot of entrepreneurs like me want, to create opportunities for other people. And this is where I think new wealth should be. We are too bogged down with our ideas of what money is, and that's done through social programming, through what we see in the media. And then we see people like Bill Gates, and we have interesting ideas by him, and then we see people like Donald Trump. Those are not the norm. There are plenty of people out there who are very down to earth, and they are millionaires, and they don't. Some of them have mansions, good for them. Some of them just have simple living, like Warren Buffett. He's lived in the same home for God knows how many years now, and he's a billionaire. So this idea of what billionaires do is I think it's a falsity. It's been given by media.
It's true. Yes, absolutely. And I remember I was on a photo shoot with one of my photographers for Time magazine, and it was a story about 100-year-olds. So we went to this man's apartment. He was apparently 105 and his sister was 107, one of the richest people on Fifth Avenue. And I walk in and it was so Spartan. It was so Spartan. I saw his bedroom. It was like a little twin bed. And here he was, this 105-year-old man who had been on Wall Street in the 30s, making, I'm sure, losing millions, but also making millions. And his lifestyle was so, what do I need?
Minimalistic.
Yeah. It was actually beautiful. Yeah.
So and then there's a lot of, I think there are more people like that, but then that's not a sexy story. So why would the media show that? And that's the reason why. But yeah, on that note, let's wrap this up. So we're going to talk to you, Kristina, in our Money Talkies. But for today, thank you so much. And tell everybody, how can we connect with you on the internet? How can we find you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, of course, Kristina Snyder, and my Instagram, which is AKA _ Kristina Snyder, and Snyder is spelled SNYDER. My company, Snyder, is now at wearesnyder.com.
Wonderful. And the link, so if you're listening to us on the podcast, the link that Kristina has just mentioned will be in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, then down below in the description section, we'll have the links to all of the links that she just mentioned as well. Check her out. She's amazing. And thank you so much for being such an amazing guest today. But we have to have you back on Money Talkies. But today, thank you so much for being such an amazing guest. And thank you for being having such an open and candid conversation with us.
Oh, thank you, Gull. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to me and Kristina today on Money Talkies. I will be back not many talkers on Friday Feature. I will be back with another Friday Feature guest with sharing their fantastic story and learning from them and finding out how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care and bye for now.